All right. So, hello. I'm back with reading chapters of Lenin's State and Revolution. I am way behind in my reading, which is unfortunately usual. But I'm as enthusiastic as ever about reading this. So, hopefully, that makes up for it on some level. No, not going to get distracted. Let's get straight into the text and not worry about any goofy little distractions that might pop into my head, which so too frequently ends up like sidetracking me. I'll do the usual thing though. So for anyone who doesn't know, I am doing these recordings because I have a very hard time sticking to stuff that I say I want to do or that I'm going to do. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to, in this weird, goofy way, hold myself accountable by recording myself reading and making sure that I read whole chunks. So far, so good. Could be better. So far, so good. So far, okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. So what we're starting off today with chapter 3, experience of the Paris Commune of 1871, Marx's analysis. And I'm genuinely excited to go ahead and jump into this. I do, however, have work in about 50 minutes. So I probably will not be able to finish this chapter, which is real sad to me, but we'll see how much we can get done in the time that we have. Okay. What made the Communards' attempt heroic? It is well known that in the autumn of 1870, a few months before the Commune, Marx warned the Paris workers that any attempt to overthrow the government would be the folly of despair. But when in March 1871 a decisive battle was forced upon the workers and they accepted it, when the uprising had become a fact, Marx greeted the proletarian revolution with the greatest enthusiasm. In spite of unfavorable auguries, Marx did not persist in the pedantic attitude of condemning an untimely. Hold on just a moment. Yeah. Marx did not persist in the pedantic attempt to condemn an untimely movement, as did the ill-famed Russian renegade from Marxism, Plekhanov, who in November 1905 wrote encouragingly about the workers' and peasants' struggle, but after 1905 decried liberal fashion. They should not have taken up arms. Marx, however, was not only enthusiastic about the heroism of the Communards, who, as he expressed it, stormed heaven. Marx, however, was not only enthusiastic about the heroism of the Communards, who, as he expressed it, stormed heaven. Although the mass revolutionary movement did not achieve its aim, he regarded it as a historic experience of enormous importance, as a certain advance of the world proletarian revolution, as a practical step that was more important than hundreds of programs and arguments. Marx endeavored to analyze this experiment, to draw tactical lessons from it, and re-examine his theory in light of it. The only correction Marx thought it necessary to make to the Communist Manifesto he made on the basis of the revolutionary experience of the Paris Commune. The last preface to the new German edition of the Communist Manifesto, signed by both its authors, is dated June 24th, 1872. In this preface, the authors, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, say that the program of the Communist Manifesto has, in some details, become out of date, and go on to say, one thing especially was proved by the Commune, viz., that the working class cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery and wield it for its own purposes. Let's see. The authors took the words that are in single quotation marks in this passage from Marx's book, The Civil War in France. Thus, Marx and Engels regarded one principal and fundamental lesson from the Paris Commune as being of such enormous importance that they introduced it as an important correction into the Communist Manifesto. Most characteristically, it is this important correction that has been distorted by the opportunists, and its meaning probably is not known to 9/10, if not 99 hundredths, of the readers of the Communist Manifesto. We shall deal with this distortion more fully further on, in a chapter devoted specially to distortions. Here it will be sufficient to note that the current vulgar interpretations of Marx's famous statement just quoted in that Marx was allegedly Here it will be sufficient to note that the current vulgar interpretation of Marx's famous statement just quoted is that Marx here allegedly emphasizes the idea of slow development in contradistinction to the seizure of power and so on. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite is the case. Marx's idea is that the working class must smash the ready-made state machinery, and not confine itself merely to laying hold of it. On April 12th, 1871, i.e., just at the time of the Commune, Marx wrote to Kugelmann, "If you look up the last chapter of my 18th Brumaire, you will find that I declare that the next attempt at the French Revolution will be no longer, as before, to transfer the bureaucratic military machine from one hand to another, but to smash it. And this is the precondition for every real people's revolution on the continent. And this is what our heroic party comrades in Paris are attempting." The words "to smash the bureaucratic military machine" briefly express the political lesson of Marxism regarding the task of the proletariat during a revolution in relation to the state. And this is the lesson that has been not only completely ignored, but positively distorted by the prevailing Kautskyite interpretation of Marxism. As for Marx's reference to the 18th Brumaire, we have quoted the relevant passage in full above. It is interesting to note in particular 2 points in the above-quoted argument of Marx. First, he restricts his conclusion to the continent. This was understandable in 1871, when Britain was still the model of a purely capitalist country. But without a militarist clique, and to a considerable degree without a bureaucracy. Marx therefore excluded Britain, where a revolution, even a people's revolution, then seemed possible, and indeed was possible without precondition of destroying ready-made state machinery. Today, I need to understand that a bit better. Marx therefore excluded Britain, where a revolution, even a people's revolution, then seemed possible, and indeed was possible, without the precondition of destroying ready-made state machinery. Okay. Lime soda water. Not the best thing for your throat when you're reading, but it's what I got. Too late now to go get some real water. Too late now. It is what it is, so they say. No, but is it really what it is? No, it's what we are willing to put up with. It is what it is, only insofar as we are willing to put up with it. Maybe I'm just just talking shit. Can't say for sure. All right. Today, in 1917, at the time of the First Great Imperialist War, this restriction made by Marx is no longer valid. Both Britain and America, the biggest and the last representatives of the whole world, of Anglo-Saxon liberty, in the sense that they had no militarist cliques and bureaucracies, have completely sunk into the all-European, filthy, bloody morass of bureaucratic military institutions which subordinate everything to themselves and suppress everything. Today, in Britain and America, too, the precondition for every real people's revolution is the smashing, the destruction of the ready-made state machinery, made and brought up to the European general imperialist perfection in those countries in the years 1914 to 1917. Secondly, particular attention should be paid to Marx's extremely profound remark that the destruction of the bureaucratic military state machine is the precondition for every real people's revolution. This idea of a people's revolution seems strange coming from Marx, so that the Russian Plekhanovites and Mensheviks, whose followers to Struve, who wish to be regarded as Marxists, might possibly declare such an expression to be a slip of the pen on Marx's part. They have reduced Marxism to such a state of wretchedly liberal distortion that nothing exists for them beyond the antithesis between bourgeois revolution and proletarian revolution, and even this antithesis they interpret in an utterly lifeless way. Sorry about that. No one needs to see the inside of my mouth. If we take the revolutions of the 20th century as examples, we shall, of course, have to admit that the Portuguese and the Turkish revolutions are both bourgeois revolutions. Neither of them, however, is a people's revolution, since in neither does the mass of the people, their vast majority, come out actively, independently, with their own economic and political demands to any noticeable degree. By contrast, although the Russian bourgeois revolution of 1905 to 1907 displayed no such brilliant success as at the time fell to the Portuguese and Turkish revolutions, it was undoubtedly a real people's revolution, since the mass of the people, their majority, the very lowest social groups, crushed by oppression and exploitation, rose independently and stamped on the entire course of the revolution the imprint of their own demands, their attempt to build in their own way, a new society in place of the old society that was being destroyed. Okay. In Europe in 1871, the proletariat did not constitute the majority of the people in any country on the continent. A people's revolution, one actually sweeping the majority into its stream, could be such only if it embraced both the proletariat and the peasants. These two classes then constituted the people. These two classes are united by the fact that the bureaucratic military state machine oppresses, crushes, exploits them. To smash this machine, to break it up, is truly in the interest of the people, of their majority, of the workers and most of the peasants, in the precondition for a free alliance of the poor peasants and the proletarians. Whereas without such an allegiance, democracy is unstable and socialist transformation is impossible. As is well known, the Paris Commune was actually working its way towards such an alliance, although it did not reach its goal owing to a number of circumstances, internal and external. Consequently, in speaking of a real people's revolution, Marx, without in the least discount, hold on. Consequently, in speaking of a real people's revolution, Marx, without in the least discounting the special features of the petty bourgeoisie, he spoke a great deal about them and often took strict account of the actual balance of class forces in most of the continental countries of Europe in 1871. On the one hand, he stated that the smashing of the state machine was required by the interests of both the workers and peasants, that it united them, that it placed before them the common task of removing the parasitic and replacing it by something new. By what exactly? Okay, so subsection 2. What is to replace the smashed state machine? In 1847, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx's answer to this question was yet a purely abstract one. To be exact, it was an answer that indicated the tasks but not the ways of accomplishing them. The answer given in the Communist Manifesto was that this machine was to be replaced by the proletariat organized as the ruling class, by the winning of the battle of democracy. The proletariat organized as the ruling class, by the winning of the battle of democracy. So a political revolution, or political battle, political victory. Marx did not indulge in utopias. He expected the experience of the mass movement to provide the reply to the question as to the specific forms this organization of the proletariat as the ruling class would assume, and as to the exact manner in which this organization would be combined with the most complete and consistent winning of the battle of democracy. Marx subjected the experience of the Commune, meager as it was, to the most careful analysis in the Civil War in France. Let us quote the most important passages of this work. All the following quotes in this chapter, with one exception, cited. Originating from the Middle Ages, there developed in the 19th century the centralized state power, with its ubiquitous organs of standing army, police, bureaucracy, clergy, and judicature. With the development of class antagonisms between capital and labor, state power assumed more and more the character of a public force organized for the suppression of the working class, as a machine of the ruling class. After every revolution which marks an advance in the class struggle, the purely coercive character of the state power stands out in bolder. No, I need to reread this. Especially since this stuff, it seems like really important stuff. Originating from the Middle Ages, they developed in the 19th century the centralized state power with its ubiquitous organs of standing army, police, bureaucracy, clergy, and judicature. With the development of class antagonisms between capital and labor, state power assumed more and more the character of a public force organized for the suppression of the working class. Of a machine of class rule. After every revolution which marks an advance in the class struggle, the purely coercive character of the state stands out in bolder and bolder relief. After the revolution of 1849, state power became the national war instruments of capital against labor. The Second Empire consolidated this. The direct antithesis to the empire was the Commune. It was the specific form of a republic that was not only to remove the monarchical form of class rule, but class rule itself. What was the specific form of the proletarian socialist republic? What was the state it began to create? The first decree of the Commune, therefore, was the suppression of the standing army and the substitution for it of the armed people. This demand now figures. Okay, hold on. What was the specific form of the proletarian socialist republic? What was the state it began to create? The first decree of the Commune, therefore, was the suppression of the standing army and the substitution for it of the armed people. The substitution for it of the armed people. This demand now figures in the program of every party calling itself socialist. The real worth of their program, however, is best shown by the behavior of our social revolutionists and Mensheviks, who, right after the revolution of February 27th, refused to carry out this demand. And there's a quote. It's not clear whose quote this is, but I can only assume this is probably a Marx quote. There is a doggo who wants into this room, and they are not allowed. This is a no doggo zone as of me reading. Okay. The Commune was formed of the municipal. Not going to do it. All right. All right. Literally, this dog came in here with for no other reason than to lay under my bed. How weird. Oh, animals. Such strange creatures. I do find them so cute, though. Animals are so cute. Even insects are cute. There are some very cute insects. People do not give insect enough cuteness points, but they're like, I like moths. I think moths are just adorable, in all honesty. Anyway, the Commune was formed of the municipal councillors chosen by universal suffrage in the various wards of the town, responsible and revocable at any time. The majority of its members were naturally working men or acknowledged representatives of the working class. The police, which until then had been instruments. Okay, hold on. Commune was formed of the municipal councillors chosen by universal suffrage in the various wards of the town, responsible and revocable at any time. Sorry, I'm just adjusting this shirt. There's this thing in the back one. Don't worry about it. Okay. The Commune was formed of the municipal councillors, chosen by universal suffrage in the various wards of the town, responsible and revocable at any time. The majority of its members were naturally working men, or acknowledged representatives of the working class. The police, which until then had been the instrument of the government, was at once stripped of its political attributes and turned into the response. Hold on. Redo. The majority of its members were naturally working men or acknowledged representatives of the working class. Okay. The municipal council, the commune was formed. Okay. We are talking about a structure. The commune was formed. See, I need to take it slow. I need to reread it because I can tell it's important. Like, and like, I read The War in France? I read most of The War in France, I think. And, this stuff just goes over my head, which is really sad to me, but, it is what it is. The commune was formed of the municipal councillors, chosen by universal suffrage in the various wards of the town, responsible and revocable at any time. The majority of its members were naturally working men or acknowledged representatives of the working class. The police, which until then had been instruments of the government, was at once stripped of its political attributes and turned into the responsible and at all times revocable agent of the commune. Okay. So were the officials of all other branches of the administration, from the members of the commune downwards. The public service had to be done at working men's wages. The privileges and the representation allowances of the high dignitaries of state disappeared along with the high dignitaries themselves. Having once got rid of the standing army and the police, the instruments of physical force of the old government, the commune proceeded at once to break the instruments of spiritual suppression. The power of the priests, the judicial functionaries lost the sham independence. They were thenceforward to be the elective, responsible, and revocable. The commune, therefore, appears to have replaced the smashed state machine only by fuller democracy. Abolition of the standing army. Hold on. The commune therefore appears to have replaced the smashed state machine only by fuller democracy. Abolition of the standing army, all officials to be elected and subject to recall. But as a matter of fact, this only signifies a gigantic replacement of certain institutions by other institutions of a fundamentally different type. This is exactly a case of quantity being transformed into quality. Democracy introduced as fully and consistently as is at all conceivable, is transformed from bourgeois and into proletarian democracy. From the state, a special force for the suppression of a particular class, into something which is no longer the state proper. Okay. Okay. That is interesting and important. It is still necessary to suppress the bourgeoisie and crush their resistance. This was particularly necessary for the Commune, and one of the reasons for its defeat was that it did not do this with sufficient determination. The organ of suppression, however, is here the majority of the population and not a minority, as was always the case under slavery, serfdom, and wage slavery. Hold on, I need to reread this. It is still necessary to suppress the bourgeoisie and crush their resistance. This was particularly necessary for the Commune, and one of the reasons for its defeat was that it did not do this with sufficient determination. The organ of suppression, however, is here the majority of the population and not a minority, as was always the case under slavery, serfdom, and wage slavery. And since the majority of people itself suppresses its oppressors, a special force of suppression is no longer necessary. In this sense, the state begins to wither away. Instead of the special institutions of privileged minority, of privileged officialdom, the chief of the standing army, the majority itself can directly fulfill all of these functions, and the more the functions of the state power are performed by the people as a whole, the less need there is for the existence of this power. In this connection, the following measures of the Commune emphasized by Marx are particularly noteworthy. The abolition of all representation allowances, and of all monetary privileges to officials, the reduction of the remuneration of all servants of the state to the level of workmen's wages. This shows more clearly than anything else the turn from bourgeois to proletarian democracy. Sorry, I got lost thinking about something while I was reading, and that just threw me off. Hold on. In this connection, the following measures of the Commune, emphasized by Marx, are particularly noteworthy. The abolition of all representation allowances, and of all monetary privileges to officials, the reduction of the remuneration of all servants of the state to the level of working men's wages. This shows more clearly than anything else the turn from bourgeois to proletarian democracy, from the democracy of the oppressors to that of the oppressed classes, from the state as a special force for the suppression of a particular class to the suppression of the oppressors by the general force of the majority of the people, the workers and the peasants. And it is on this particularly striking point, perhaps the most important as far as the problem of the state is concerned, that the ideas of Marx have been most completely ignored. In popular commentaries, the number of which is legion, this is not mentioned. The thing done is to keep silent about it, as if it were a piece of old-fashioned naivety, just as Christians, after their religion had been given the status of state religion, forgot the naivety of primitive Christianity, with its democratic revolutionary spirit. The reduction of the remuneration of high state officials seems simply a demand of naive, primitive democracy. One of the founders of modern opportunism, the ex-social democrat Edward Bernstein, has more than once repeated the vulgar bourgeois jeers at primitive democracy. Like all opportunists and like the President Kautskyites, he did not understand at all that, first of all, the transition from capitalism to socialism is impossible without a certain reversion to primitive democracy. For how else can the majority, and then the whole population without exception, proceed to discharge state functions? And that secondly, primitive democracy based on capitalism and capitalist culture is not the same as primitive democracy in prehistoric or pre-capitalist times. Capitalist culture has created large-scale production, factories, railways, and the postal service, telephones, etc. And on this basis, the great majority of the functions of the old state power have become so simplified and can be reduced to such exceedingly simple operations of registration, filing, and checking that they can be easily performed by every literate person, can quite easily be performed for ordinary working man's wages, and that these functions can and must be stripped of every shadow of privilege, of every semblance of official grandeur. All officials, without exception, elected and subject to recall at any time, their salaries reduce the level of ordinary working men's wages. These simple and self-evident democratic measures, while completely uniting the interests of the workers and the majority of the peasants, at the same time serve as a bridge leading from capitalism to socialism. These measures concern the reorganization of the state, the purely political reorganization of society, but of course they acquire their full meaning and significance only in connection with the expropriation of the expropriators. Either bring These measures concern the reorganization of the state, the purely political reorganization of society, but of course, they acquire their full meaning and significance only in connection with the expropriation of the expropriators, either being accomplished or in preparation, i.e., with the transformation of capitalist private ownership of the means of production into social ownership. To quote now Marx, the Commune, Marx wrote, made the catchword of all bourgeois revolutions, cheap government, a reality. By abolishing the two greatest sources of expenditure, the army and the officialdom. The Commune made the catchword of all bourgeois revolutions, cheap government, a reality. By abolishing the two greatest sources of expenditure, the army and the okay, I get you. From the peasants as from the peasants as from other sections of the petty bourgeoisie, only an insignificant few rise to the top, get on in the world in the bourgeois sense, i.e., become either well-to-do bourgeois or officials in secure and privileged positions. In every capitalist country where there are peasants, as there are in most capitalist countries, the vast majority of them are oppressed by the government and long for its overthrow, long for cheap government. This can be achieved only by the proletariat, and by achieving it, the proletariat at the same time takes a step towards the socialist organization of the state. Okay. Well, as much as I would love to finish this chapter, and trust me, I would. It's true. In order to make sure I'm not late to work, which I have been so often, at least until I recently restarted my ADHD medication. Like, I've literally been late to work every single day for the past 6 months. It's nuts. But anyways, I I've got to go, but I might even finish this tonight. We'll see, because I really do want to finish this. And I feel like I go through and I process this more when I'm doing this live streaming stuff. Like, I feel as though I'm really like working harder to try to understand what I'm reading when I'm doing the live streaming, because then I'm reading it. Yes, I'm letting it just, first pass. But like I'm also stopping to like, wait, I didn't get that. And I really need that. I really need that. I can't just rush. I feel like the whole time I've been doing readings for this group I'm in, like I'm just like trying to rush to get through everything, and I swear to God I absorb like maybe a fraction of this stuff just because like it takes time for me to really like get it in the old noggin. But this has been helping, that's for sure. So I feel like I should definitely keep doing it. All right, so that's enough. So I'm stopping at the I'm stopping just before subsection 3, which is the abolition of parliamentarism. All right. So I will end it here. Bye. Oh, this is taking longer than I thought.